And welcome to Hamilton Talks. I am Larry DiIanni, and Hamilton Talks is your community affairs program, speaking with interesting Hamiltonians who have a story to tell. And speaking of that, my guest today is E Graziani, who's an author, so she's got lots of stories to tell. Welcome to the program, Edie.
Thank you. Thank you for having me there.
Edie, it's so nice to have you here. And of course, I did say you were an author. You're also a teacher.
I am.
You're a homemaker. You're a mother. You're a wife.
Yes.
You're a member of the community.
I wear many hats.
Many hats. But so if someone were to say to you, what are you? What profession are you? What would you say?
I would say a combination. Well, teacher first and foremost, of course, because that is my vocation. That was my calling. But through the years, I've developed a hobby. So I think I'm ready to tack author onto the end of that and accept teacher/author.
Well, and in fact, you're a published author, so not every author writes for the public. You do.
I've been very fortunate.
Well, and we'll talk about that because you've got a body of work at this point. It's a growing body of work. But we'll talk about some of the stuff that you do. But first, let's let our viewers get to know E Graziani a little bit. You've already said that you're a teacher. Are you a native Hamiltonian?
I am. I was born here. Yes.
And where did you go to school?
I started at St. Mary's on McNabb Street, and then to Holy Name School, where I completed my graded education, and then to Cathedral Girls High School, when it was still a girls' high school, and then on to McMaster University, and then Brock University for Teachers College.
Yes.
Yeah.
So truly local, and in fact, McNabb, you were a North End kid as well. Where did you live?
Born on McNabb Street.
Well, right on McNabb, right down the street from
corner
school.
of McNabb and Murray, yes.
Do you ever go back to that neighborhood?
I've been there, yes, I've been there, sure.
And what do you think of it now?
Oh, it's changed. It's changed a lot since since we've been there. The one-way streets aren't there anymore, and I miss them.
You're probably one of the few people.
I do. I'm probably one of the only ones who misses them.
And of course, now you live in the East End of the city, in the Stony Creek area, and you teach in the East End. Do you
I do. I teach at St. David Catholic Elementary.
And what do you teach?
I teach a grade 4 or 5 class. Yes, I teach.
So the whole spectrum of curriculum, or do you focus on?
Religion, math, literacy. I teach the science portion of the science and social studies, arts, visual arts, and physical education. Mm-hmm.
So really, that's the whole portfolio, or much of the portfolio that kids are exposed to, with probably the exception of French, probably.
Yes, French and social studies we trade off.
You trade off with other teachers, and of course, then you went to Cathedral High School when it was a girls' school.
Yes.
Now it's co-ed, of course, and then McMaster. What did you study at Mac?
I studied history. And I majored in Renaissance and Reformation.
All right, and so that explains some of your interest and some of your writing as well. We'll talk about your first novel in a few moments, as well as your current one. And how did you go from studying history, and I understand you went to Teachers College to become a teacher, and you've done that, but then to actually picking up a pen and writing both fiction and historical fiction in a way?
Well, I didn't start writing. I didn't start writing until later on in life. It's probably began in 2000. I think I really began in 2011. 2008. It started with an idea in my head about how women may have perceived themselves, or how would perceive themselves in another time, in another place. I had discovered an old university essay in my basement about the role of women in Renaissance Florence, and at the time, my daughters were, they're teenagers, and they're developing their own interests in that. And I used to say to them, you're very fortunate, because you're standing on the shoulders of a lot of women who've sacrificed a lot for you. So appreciate what you have as women. And the idea to write this book just kind of grew from there.
So, and I get that. I mean, you've got a historical bent, and you've got some daughters, 4 daughters, in fact.
Yes.
And you wanted to leave a legacy. In fact, you dedicate some of your work to your family.
Okay.
But to actually have the discipline when you've got a full-time job, both as a mother and as a teacher, to actually find the time to write novels has got to take some amount of discipline.
It takes a large amount of discipline, yes. The first novel was written over the span of about 3 years, simply because I had abandoned it so many times, and I didn't think that I would ever finish it or that it would ever amount to anything. When I did finish it, and I was fortunate enough to have it published, I had already begun some other works, and I had kind of disciplined myself to spend a certain amount of time or get words down on paper. So right now, when I sit down at my laptop, I try and get at least 1,000 words done. I try nightly, but sometimes it just doesn't happen. So,
but that's your target, 1,000 words
1,000
whenever you sit down to write. And these are
Yes.
the polished words, right?
Yeah,
Or are
well, not polished words, no, because I mean, there's always rewrites. You're as an author, you never go with your first draft. It's a revisit all the time. My first book, I went through 5 times in terms of editing, so I could probably recite it verbatim. But the second one was a little bit more polished, just because of the experience
that's why I don't think I could be a novelist or a writer, because whenever I've written something, I will go back to it and go back to it and go back to it. At some point, you got to cut bait, right?
You do, and that was one of my mistakes when I first started writing. I would go back to the beginning and I would change it, and then I would go back to the beginning and I would change it, and I'd revisit it the week after and I'd go back. But really, I took some advice from someone that I knew, and they said, just write it through. Just get it down on paper, and then you can go back and
then
change
the
what you
rewrite
need to.
happens later.
Yeah.
You told me earlier when we chatted that one of your inspirations was a colleague, a teacher, or a former
Yes.
teacher of yours.
Yes.
Tell us that story, because I think it's nice. Let's give teachers a bit of a plug.
Yes. Well, actually, it started in Teachers College. There's a language arts class that we take, as well as teaching math and whatnot. And she had mentioned that she really enjoyed reading. She enjoyed reading my work. So I thought, well, that's nice. And as a teacher, you're a lifelong learner, so you continue to take courses, as I did. And the professor who taught my course mentioned how much he enjoyed reading my work. And he said, you've really got a knack for writing. So I thought to myself, wow, a teacher inspiring another teacher, that's great, and that's kind of what spurred me on.
And so, that's the role of a teacher, really, is to provide inspiration to your students so that they can take things to the next level.
Correct.
Well, the first book you wrote, let's see if we can maybe show it, if our camera can take a shot of that. It's called Alice, right? Alice on the Rocks?
Alice of the Rocks.
Alice of the Rocks. And it's a novel. Target audience for Alice?
Young adult.
Young adult.
But really anybody can read it.
And really, without giving the story away, there's an interesting aspect. You call it science fiction.
Science fiction, time travel.
Time, because it involves with time
Yes.
travel. So give us just a little kernel of what it's about.
It's about a young woman who finds herself adopted, and her family moves from Italy to Toronto. And she goes back to Italy on vacation, and she finds that she's having these episodes of dizziness and anxiety. And she becomes, involved with a young man, and she finds an affinity to kind of like a soulmate. But what she doesn't realize is that she has a past history with this young man, 500 years in the past. So Leonardo da Vinci is involved, the Medici are involved, the Borgia are involved, and it's really quite an interesting story.
Well, now these are big time names
Yes.
that you weave into your works, and of course it follows the tradition of many writers as well that take his history and weave fiction into that
Yes.
history. In this novel, there's also the science fiction aspect, the time travel aspect, and really the protagonist is the young woman who grows and learns about herself, and we learn about the experiences of women through this novel as well.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
Now, set in Italy, the second novel, War in My Town, is also set in Italy. What's the connection to Italy?
Well, I mean, besides the fact that I love Italy and that I love vacationing there, and my parents are from Italy, so I was born here. But I think that my parents have always inculcated into me a love for my origins, I guess, from my culture, from the region where we're from. And I just feel very comfortable writing about it.
And indeed, you know, authors write about what they know best, and so you know your heritage and your culture best, and it becomes a subject of your books. And the region that your family comes from is?
We are from Tuscany.
The Tuscany region. So Florence is the major city in Tuscany.
Yes.
People will know the rolling hills.
Yes.
Some of that description makes it into your next book that we'll talk about. And of course the wonderful wines of the Tuscany region are world famous as well. And there's a little snippet of wine drinking in family gatherings in your book as well.
Yes.
So your mom and dad were born there. They emigrated to this country, like
emigrated to this country in 1958.
In 1958, you were born.
I was born in 61.
Well, I wasn't even going to ask that, but
I don't mind.
I was going to say many years later.
Yes.
But you were certainly born here, as we said, and went to school here, and so on.